Good design can often be awarded to clean lines, an interior curated with intent, and a firm understanding of what makes for a comfortable home. Well, today's finest home ticks all these boxes thanks to a visionary who's fluent in all aspects of design. In today's episode of Finest Homes, we're visiting a house that enjoyed a renovation that makes it timeless and functional. Set in a leafy suburb, the house plays on strong architectural lines and enjoys a garden that very much forms part of the design. The designer that gave this home its most recent update is Dylan Tomage of Curation Interior. Dylan, you were tasked to reimagine the client's house. Now, considering it was an existing structure, what was the client's brief?
The client's brief was to re-look at the space in a way that becomes a lot more functional and also houses the quantity of people that they want to have in their home. I needed to look at how the space flowed, how the spaces interact with each other, because the space is quite vast, and we needed to look at proportions and how the client really wants to live within the space.
Yeah, I mean, that's instantly recognizable. Upon entry, there's an openness and a calmness to the space. Now, off of the back of the client's brief, how would you describe the style?
So for me, the style is a future classic, which I think is really amazing, because the structure of the house is very modernist, because it's got two concrete slabs and just glass wrapped around. But from an interior point of view, I really wanted to bring it alive with pieces that were from multiple different eras, and that's what makes it a future classic.
I want to chat about the space that we're in, the kitchen. I mean, there's a distinct sort of neutral palette that you recognize. There are really clever features like the wooden-esque tiles in the back. Tell me how you put this ensemble together.
So the kitchen is the heart of the home, and it did look a lot different to what it is today. One of the key things for me was to raise this island up where it becomes a far more interactive space. So like where we're here right now, we're just easy to be connected to the rest of what's happening within the kitchen. The wooden-esque tiles that you speak about, I really actually wanted those to be original wooden tiles, but because there's an open flame, there was a bit of a high risk. So we went with the wooden-esque, but what it does is it also brings a lot of warmth into the space because the space is so big. The other thing that was really important to me was pushing boundaries, and when we did the house originally, we introduced a black kitchen, which wasn't the norm. It was really something as a point of difference, and it really came out so beautifully. So the finish that we used is called Phoenix, and what it is, it's a really hard-wearing resin type finish, and you can pretty much scratch it into whatever you want, which makes it very functional and timeless, and at the same time indestructible with kids in the house, which I think is really important, especially when you want a house to look quite clean and sophisticated.
You're right. I mean, black in a kitchen is unusual, but it works so well. So did you open up yourself to some design challenges in making this decision?
I did, and the best part about it was taking my clients on the journey with me, because it was quite a hard thing to get them to like buy into it. They had to really sleep on it. But what I love about the black, it's such a neutral color, and what it does is it allows the outside colors that we see behind me to really just make everything come alive. It's almost like a stabilizer, like a neutral palette that just makes it feel so strong and sophisticated.
And I love the continuity. I mean, the kitchen is really part of a massive space that spills into the lounge and living area, and so you see the consistency in the black and sort of small touches here and there.
Yeah, it was really important for me. And the one thing that was also really important for me was extending the kitchen out slightly. So this island, we extended past what the barriers are currently, because I wanted every space to speak to each other. And that's why we have the continuity of black everywhere, because there's this thing where you subconsciously see it without actually realizing there's a similarity throughout the house. So it's a beautiful tone of voice.
It's almost counterintuitive. I mean, you're working with a neutral palette and then you have such a bold color as black. What were the key guidelines that made you ensure that, you stay within the appropriate lines of design?
That's a very good question. But I think the thing for me was making sure that the black textures that I was using were ideal. So mixing the different elements like wood and glass and metal. And when you start doing that, it really brings the space to life.
With a clever play on colour and texture, I'm interested to see how Dylan has linked the different spaces throughout the home using different design elements. Dylan, we see really clever architectural features in this home. For example, we've got the clear story windows as well as the atriums that are interspersed around the home. Talk to us a bit about the interplay between indoor and outdoor.
So I think what's really beautiful about the home is that the outdoors come inside and vice versa. So wherever you are, you actually get to see the peripheral views around, which is really beautiful. And that's a fantastic way to bring a pop of color into the space too, especially with our neutral palette that we have going on here. But the other thing that for me that was really important was making sure that nature is the feature through this process. So even how we bring in the different wooden textures and bring in greenery from beautiful flowers or trees that we have here in the atrium, it was just so important to make those features stand out.
Now, because of this interplay, I'd love to talk from the outside in. Outside, there's a beautiful intimate spot with a fireplace. What was the inspiration behind it?
So what's really lovely about that space is my clients love to travel and they love to bring the elements of the travel back to South Africa, and they are a bit of foodies. So the whole point of that is you can adjust the different heights within the braai, which speaks to their culinary needs, which is really lovely.
Now I want to bring it in a little bit. There's a beautiful flow for what is essentially one large room, but there are distinct areas that play a particular function.
So what's really lovely about the space is the sheer scale of it. So it was really important to look at how we use furniture to scale it up and not down. So what was really important was how does the living room speak to the entrance hall, to the dining room. So within the living room, what was really important was the whole family needs to be able to sit around the television and watch a game and just be. And also to not lose the formality of the structure of the exterior of the house and just bring it together in a really sophisticated manner.
Talk to me about how you created that level of comfort.
So what was really important was creating symmetry within the spaces. So we spoke about the kitchen, we had the wooden-esque wall, and I wanted to bring that into the living space as well. So we've cladded the wall, or the wall unit in wood as well. So there's continuity between the two spaces, but what was also really important was how does a TV room not feel like a TV room, right? So we've got this really long, beautiful, simple wall unit that has the contrast between white and black, which I think is really timeless. So, and we also have really beautiful art that actually supports the two looks, with the TV in the center. And I'm not the biggest fan of a television, but I think we've pulled it off really well here.
I'd agree. And tell me about the balance between, again, working through a neutral palette, but also including some sort of color to make it all work.
So for me, color doesn't have to actually be bright, bold colors. It can actually be textures. So we played with different leathers. So we have the Chesterfield chair here, which is like a beautiful worn leather. We have the Eames chair, which is a beautiful white leather. And then we have the couch, which is in a wonderful light linen fabric. And all of those features start coming together in a really beautiful way with the pops of color of the scatter cushions. And then also the greenery from the outside that really brings it to life.
I'm so glad you touched on the outside because I imagine that light plays a massive role here.
So what's really lovely about the space is the natural light that comes in here, especially during the day. But at night, you want to flip the switch, literally. And for me, with the space was to create more ambient lighting, especially around the space. So it never felt too harsh and too bright. So we have lots of pockets of ambient lighting around, and it just makes the space feel very simple and sophisticated and not overly stylized, right?
Tell us more about how scale and proportion played a role in putting this look together.
Because the space is so big, the scale was and proportion was really important. So we looked at bigger furniture pieces that you wouldn't fit into a normal home. So each piece of this modular unit is about 1 meter squared, and it can house a lot of people, so you can have a lot of family members around here. But what was also really important was looking at how to make the space feel elongated. So starting with the track light that we have here, and also the wall unit where we have the two simple black lines and then the track light that supports that. It just makes the space feel longer, which detracts from the sheer scale of the actual furniture pieces.
There are 4 distinct spaces that we see here. What did you use to link them all together?
To link the different spaces together, I wanted to use an entrance table which just made it feel a little bit more inviting. choosing a round table just keeps the flow going, and it doesn't feel forced. It just feels like this organic way that people naturally move within the space without them actually realizing how they will navigate through it.
Now, I want to talk about the hero piece in the room, this awesome fireplace. It really creates symmetry in the space.
And the irony about that is it is quite a big piece, and as you come through the entrance hall, I didn't want it to overpower the space, so that's why we've had it made a little bit lower. But this was also a bit of a feature because the space is so big. We needed something to warm up the space because in winter in Johannesburg, it's really chilly.
And I suppose that then lends itself to the dining room,
which is such a beautiful space to have beautiful dinner parties, luncheons, and it's got such a unique feel with the background of the outside area.
And how those lights above the table, it looks awesome.
I love those lights. So the lights have a fun story. They were running late and we had to fly them in, and they were such a key feature to the space because I didn't want anything that was really heavy and chunky. I wanted something more organic and flowed, and with these lights what they do is they really don't destroy the background view of the garden, which for me is such a key feature. And at night it just adds another layer to make a beautiful dining setting.
Because the space is so vast, what sort of key considerations do you need to make, and did you maybe face some challenges?
So with the lights being quite sculptural, I wanted to add a different element from an art point of view. So we had this beautiful metal custom piece made that we have against the wall here, which just adds a different dynamic. It brings a bit of a 3D feel into the space, but it also adds to the scale of the space, but also in a very unique way, which isn't predictable, and it is very timeless.
Stay with us, as after the break we make our way to the main bedroom to see how the interplay between indoor and outdoor continues. In today's episode of Finest Homes, we're visiting a house that ticks a few modernist boxes. Having picked up on some key design features like the subtle yet undeniable presence of the color black and texture in the form of leathers, wood and linens, I'm interested to see how Dylan's vision has translated into the main bedroom of the home. Dylan, yet another room with the presence of the garden, and boy does it stand out. But what other elements did you use in this room to make it all come together?
So for me, consistency was key. So we brought more of the wooden element into it. So the whole back wall here that's wrapped in wood, the consistency of the black, all the floors in the house are black in terms of all the bedrooms, and just adding that warmth and texture, and also keeping it quite a neutral palette. And then looking at bringing in the linens and marble and wood and more different types of colors, which just bring it together in a really, really beautiful way.
So it sounds like it's a combination of sort of textures and colors and finding that perfect balance.
Exactly, and by doing that, you give it this timeless feel where it doesn't feel like it's been bought at one store. It feels like it's been collected over time, which I think really adds to the tranquility of a bedroom.
Well, speaking of pulling things together, I mean, space is so important when it comes to the comfortability of a bedroom. So can you talk us through the navigation of this master bedroom?
So for a true master bedroom, I believe you should have a walk-in closet. So behind this wall is a fantastic walk-in closet. And then it walks into a beautiful ensuite bathroom that has a steam shower that looks out into the garden, which again mimics what you see here where we are standing right now.
And I absolutely love how this beautiful view of the garden really invites that peace and tranquility that you'd really want in a bedroom.
And that's the thing that I loved about being part of the garden design, was how do we bring the outdoors indoors and the indoors outdoors. So what we did was we looked at the key pillars around the house that holds up the facade, and we put some slate details around the house. So that's again continuity of the black design detail. And we also added pockets of sculptural elements. So it has this brutalism, which I think is really sexy, with this whole nature element, which is also really pleasing. So it gives us like future classic look.
I really enjoy the fact that the indoor-outdoor theme has carried on not only from the bedrooms, but right onto the patio. It really is maximizing on the beautiful space that surrounds the home.
And the best thing about this is the way the house was constructed by being just 2 concrete slabs and wrapped in glass. What's really lovely is everything opens outwards, so you really do maximize that. And that's where we spoke about earlier, where we have the pops of color with the greenery coming in, and that just makes it feel alive, and it feels like you almost one with earth, right?
Well, there's nothing that says continuity like the art pieces outside in the garden that match the inside. I absolutely love that.
And that's the beautiful thing, right? It was completely intentional, and the whole point of it was playing with this juxtapose of real raw brutalism and this naturalism of the garden being all overgrown and a little bit structured at the same time. It was just all pulling this together in a really sophisticated, timeless way.
After the break, we take a closer look at Atriums as a design element with Gregory Mark Landscapes, and finish off our home tour with Dylan by chatting about the elements that brought today's feature home to life. In today's episode of Finest Homes, we're visiting a home that enjoys strong visual cues from modernist-inspired architecture. The home, that is essentially two concrete slabs separated by glass, has been updated by Dylan Tomage of Curation Interior to what he describes as a future classic design scheme. An architectural feature that caught my eye in this home is the incorporation of two atriums in the main passage of our feature home. Although not responsible for these atriums, but rather to shed some light on this design feature, our team caught up with landscape designer Gregory Mark.
Atriums are a wonderful way to bring nature and plant material into any room. We've done them for bathrooms, where there's a garden bathroom atrium. We've also worked on atriums that are the centerpiece of the living room, and what more beautiful way to bring in all that wonderful natural light and airflow and movement into the house. Architecturally, when working with an atrium, I'm always looking for those beautiful picture windows, floor-to-ceiling glass that really let in all that beautiful light and minimal obstruction of the eye. You know, we want to see the planting composition. Putting beautiful trees in the atrium themselves, they become sculptures in the home and a lovely 3D element that is organic. We request also drainage as a must. Your plants are going to be happy if they've got drainage, and especially confined into an atrium space, we need to get the water out as soon as possible. Open air atriums are the best because they let in all the natural light, they let in rain, and great for air movement. As a designer, I always get very excited to work in a small space because everything that you put there matters so much in terms of the planting composition and your layers and your shape and your form. So for me, it's a beautiful space just to show off. In a small space, there is so many beautiful low light planting and indoor plants that work well in an atrium, but choose your plant material to suit your requirements. Another important design element is water. Make sure that you have a water point in your atrium before construction is completed because you need water for a garden and your plants will be happy throughout the year.
Before the break, we explored the main bedroom of today's feature house. As we make our way to the patio, one cannot help but to adore the clean lines that marries the architecture with the landscaped garden. Now I want to talk a bit about the area that we're in right now, which is the patio.
So for this space, I just wanted it to be a continuation of that indoor-outdoor lifestyle. Because it is undercover, it doesn't need to feel like it's not part of the house. So when you look within the box that we're sitting in, it just feels like a continuation. So we get the same tones, and we've just made this a little bit more relaxed. So when you're having a glass of wine or a beer, it's easy to enjoy the space around us.
Dylan, there really has been a prolific use of the color black, and I love the fact that it really runs from the interior right out to the exterior. What was the guiding principle to making this all work?
So starting from the exterior, I wanted the house to have key feature points, and what it does is it really just anchors down the house in a really sophisticated way. And then by bringing that from the outside inside, it just was a continuity, which I think is really important when building a space.
In my opinion, probably the most unusual space to use the color is the kitchen, and yet it worked. Can you just break that down for us and how this actually came together?
So for me, bringing black into a kitchen is a bit of a tricky color because of oil and, you know, steam and stuff like that. But what was really important was the use of what kind of fabrication, and it just created a timeless feel, especially against the travertine floors and the white walls. It just creates such a nice anchor between the two conversation pieces.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, you incorporated art, which you see as well in the living area or the lounge, where you've used beautiful accessories and decor pieces to continue the theme.
I did, and that's again carrying the continuity, because for me it's about making sure that everything speaks to each other but is still quite unique within its own entity.
And yet, you know, it's working against a neutral palette, right? So how do you ensure that you don't go over the top and defeat the object of having a perfect, almost monochromatic theme?
So that's where you add warmer tones to it. So that's where you add the bit of the wood element, which we saw coming through in the kitchen with the tiled wall, and in the living room we had the wooden wall panel, and those kind of elements really just soften the space, adding lots of linens and then mixing the different textures like leathers and different fabrications, just to really bring it together in a sophisticated way, which is still very timeless. Add more black into the space is quite important so that there is continuity. So like in the living room, we have the TV unit with the black detail, which elongates the space. So when you're choosing black, make sure you do it in a way that accentuates the space and it doesn't overpower the space. Then I think black is a color that you don't actually have to be scared of.
I'd love to hear about some of the challenges that you faced with using such a bold yet impactful color.
So for me, the challenge wasn't using black. For me, it was incorporating enough warmth to complement the black, because the black, I think, underpins the whole home in a really sophisticated way, which also makes it timeless. So 4 years later, we're sitting here and it hasn't aged. It's just become more timeless.
Well, you've used the color black quite prolifically across the whole home, but are there some areas that would be limited to maybe not using the color?
In this home particularly, I would definitely not have done a black couch, but I think holistically, when you approach your own home, always make sure that black is an accent color and not the feature color, but do it in a way that complements the space. So find ways to elongate the space or to create height, or just add that touch of sophistication through the space, but marry it with some beautiful neutral tones.
That's it for this week's episode of Finest Homes.